Christine Hassler.
Emily Fletcher.
It's happening.
It's happening.
After all of our Zoom
I
dates, what originally inspired you to become a coach, and how many years ago was that?
Almost 20. It was 2004. I had my first client.
2004.
2004.
So like that was not a common thing to say you are or had a life coach.
No. When I said I was a coach, people asked me what sport.
Yeah.
And they were very confused when I said life coach because I was like an early 20-something, you know. I didn't choose it. It chose me. So I was working my butt off in Hollywood, worked my way up to become an agent, like really thought my path was that. But what was at the root of me working in Hollywood was deep insecurity that I was wanting to solve by becoming somebody. It wasn't because I had this huge passion for the industry. It was because, all right, well, if you want to be somebody, go to Hollywood. And if you can't be famous yourself, be around famous people. So that was the thing that pushed me, was just this wanting to prove myself, wanting to be somebody, wanting to be in the adult version of the popular crowd that I never was in. And insecurity and a fierce inner critic, they are amazing motivators. They're not inspiring, but they can motivate you.
Ooh, that's interesting. The difference between inspiration, moving towards, and motivation, which might be moving away from.
Yeah, motivation's like a push, and inspiration is a pull. And I'd rather have somebody pull me towards them than push me.
Interesting. And where do you think that was coming from?
It was feeling at a very young age like something was wrong with me. I was on Prozac at age 11.
Why?
Good question. I think there were a lot of reasons. If I, in my own work and when I've done my own inner child work, there are a couple things going on. Highly empathic kid, highly intuitive kid, highly sensitive kid, but also like a very well-behaved and cerebral kid at the same time. So I could mask. I was like a deeply feeling kid that often didn't necessarily show it. I just internalized a lot of things. And depression is repression. So I'm internalizing my own feelings. I had trauma that I had repressed that I didn't remember until I was 35 years old. So that was going on at the same time. But I think the main thing was I just was so empathic and feeling so much of everybody's everything and and also so intuitive and had really no idea what to do with that. And so I didn't know what was my feeling, what was someone else's feeling. And so I think I just repressed and internalized everything. And my parents, who loved me very much, didn't know what to do and took me to a psychiatrist. And I still remember going to one psychiatrist and them showing me ink blot tests and just thinking in my head, am I crazy? Like, am I like crazy? And then I also had really bad headaches, migraines. So I had lots of MRIs, and then I had delayed puberty, so I was like poked and prodded, so I had a lot of medical trauma as well. All of those things combined, I think, just set up a situation where my parents just didn't really know what to do. And so that's what they did. And my mom, I don't really remember. My mom said it really helped. But what I do remember is sitting in the doctor's office and being told I have a chemical imbalance. And if you were diabetic, you would take insulin. And in that, what I made that mean is something's wrong with me. So between that and then not starting puberty when everybody else did, and then being teased a lot in school, and then other things, I just formed a very, very, very pervasive, deep story of there's something wrong with me. And so to compensate for that, because whenever we have a deep story that's usually not true, if something's wrong with me, or I'm not safe, or I'm not lovable, or any of those, or I don't belong, any of those core things that we human beings need to feel to survive, we have to compensate by being an overachiever, or being a people pleaser, or starting to control everything, or performing and being a good distractor. I mean, we come up with these brilliant strategies that often then become what we think is our identity. So, and the coach thing, to answer your question, it shows me I didn't choose it. So what happened is, and this is why I'm such a fan of doing our own inner work, because our own suffering often leads to our purpose. I mean, the original definition of the word passion is suffering.
Wait, what?
Yes.
What's that etymology?
Passion of the Christ.
Oh.
It's suffering. That's the original root of the word. We've evolved it to mean what I love, which I love because so much of what we love and what we feel like our dharma is, or our life mission, comes from our suffering.
Right, we found the thing that brought us out of the suffering, and it's like BDSM, right?
Yes.
It's the cessation of pain that leads to the pleasure. And so, oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Back to why you became a coach. It chose you.
Yeah, it chose me. So I had this whole kind of like quarter life crisis that happened because I quit my job and I was making a lot of money, and then I went into debt. My fiance broke up with me 6 months before our wedding. Oof. So that was a huge one. And I started having just health problems because I had all the years of antidepressants. And P.S., I'm not anti-medication. Like, I really believe it has a place. But for me, being on it at 11 and still on it in my 20s, and then I had headaches, and so I'd taken so much over-the-counter prescription medication. Like, it just was starting to wear down my health. And I just found myself on my bathroom floor one night just sobbing, going, oh, like, this is my life. And I tell this story with a lot of compassion for myself, but also a lot of just awareness that people go through far worse things than what I'm describing. And for me at that time, it was a low point. Yeah. And that was when I realized, I wasn't laying on my bathroom floor and I didn't have some huge spiritual awakening or epiphany. It's just a dot connected that I was the common denominator, and I had the choice either to be a victim in that or actually do something. Because I had started to see a coach named Mona, and I was hot and cold with her because she'd say things that I was not ready to hear or not ready to do. But after that bathroom floor moment, I called her up and I'm like, I'm coming every week. I'm coming every week. I wanna dive in. And that led to writing my first book, 20-something, 20 Everything. And how coaching came out of it is I interviewed many people for that book, and they kept saying, can I set up a session with you? And I said, why? And they'd say, well, aren't you a coach or a counselor or something? And I said, no. And they said, well, you should be. So then I went to Mona and said, everybody's telling me I should do what you do. Everyone's telling me I should be a coach. She's like, I know. And I said, I've been asking you what my purpose is. I've been sitting here wondering what to do with my life. She's like, it's not my job to tell you. I was like, I thought it kind of was. You're my coach.
But that does feel like high level. That feels like high integrity.
She was a ninja. Talk about ninjas. She, unfortunately, is no longer on this planet, but she was Christ consciousness, dressed in 1980s clothes with the tchotchkes all over her house, who played musical theater on her piano and would often take me on a road trip during one of my sessions in her beat-up van to drive through McDonald's and get French fries and a Coke. She was just, and it was so good for me.
What city are we in?
Sherman
what
Oaks.
Decade? Okay, Sherman Oaks.
Sherman Oaks.
She's in her
2000s.
40s, 60s, 20s?
She died at 50,
Okay.
and I saw her for 14 years.
Wow.
And so she was in her 30s when I started seeing her. I was in my early 20s.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so you come to her and you're like, Mona, I think I'm supposed to be a coach. She's like, duh.
Yeah, and she's like, all right, let's go.
And so she trained you?
She trained me, and then I got a master's in spiritual psychology and other degrees and training, and I've gotten lots of training along the way. Mm-hmm. And when she trained me, she said, okay, you're only coaching 20-somethings because that's as far as you've gone in your life experience. You just coach what you know. And of course, that's expanded. But that was my first, the first 10 years of my career were 20-somethings and millennials, and my corporate speaking and my second book and all of that was that, because that was really the phase of life I was in. Mm-hmm. So coaching found me. I never thought, oh, I want to be a coach. It just happened, which I love because it definitely feels like it pulled me.
And so when we were doing our opening prayer and our opening invocation, and I asked you, what's your magic wand? What would you love for the medicine for people to receive? And you said, I want for people to not feel broken. I want them to feel like they're normal.
Yeah.
And so what have you found in your own work or in coaching other people? What are the themes or through lines that make people feel like they're broken or make them feel like they're not normal?
Well, comparison's a huge one.
Okay.
Really, we compare ourselves so much, and we have a lot of beliefs about the way we think life should be, or the way we think we should be, or what other people have told us we should be. And if we're not that in any way, then we think something's wrong with us. And often we have dark thoughts, or we do sabotaging behavior, or we do behavior we're not proud of, or we have a really nasty inner critic, or we keep, we see a hole and we know it's there, we keep walking into it. And then we think, okay, why can't I not walk into this hole? And we see ourselves in the same patterns and dating the same emotionally unavailable person. And then we just kind of go, what is wrong with me? Or we try to lose weight for years and years. Or we try to heal a health problem. And we just become so fixated on the problem and what is lacking or what we don't have that we start to think something's really wrong with me. And that stems from way, way back. I mean, that really stems from childhood. Most of us in childhood have had one or more instances where we haven't felt safe and we haven't felt like being us, being ourselves was okay. We were too much, we were not enough, both. And at a very young age, we just start to form this story that's pervasive. And I think a lot of people walk around pretending they're okay when inside they're not.
So, you know, I have the privilege of being in this beautiful mastermind, what is our Council of Queens, which I feel so grateful to be in there.
Me too.
And just really just to share with people what that is. It's, I think, 7 of us, all in similar-ish businesses, like in the self-help world. People have been at this for a while, so we have a level of establishment in our fields. But I love it because it's, if I go to a person who's running a $200 million company and I'm like, hey, I'm working on an ad strategy, like there's just wildly different advice they're going to give me versus very different than someone that's starting a brand new business. And I feel like to have this similar echelon of experience and similar problems and similar expertise has been so outrageously valuable just from a business perspective. But what I'm enjoying even more is the depth of friendship and connection that is happening. And I love that I get to know you better as a person.
Too.
And so through this, I've gotten to see your successes and the challenges of becoming a mom and like balancing this thing between I have this beautiful, successful coaching business, I'm an author, I'm a sought after coach, and I want to be with my daughter a lot, and I'm breastfeeding and sleep and all of this. Like, you just like walk us through what that transition has been like.
I mean, for me, I think the transition was, it was beautiful and difficult. Like the reason I think it was most difficult is because I did wait so long to have a kid. I had my daughter in my 40s. So, which again, people were like, oh my gosh, you got pregnant naturally in your 40s. I'm like, yeah, like we don't die when we turn 40. Like, you know, it's
I could talk about that for a long time.
Yeah, me too.
I think there's a lot of bad science out there that conflates maternal age with maternal health.
Exactly.
It's like most people's health decline as they age, but not everyone's.
Exactly. One of the many reasons I had a home birth, because I'd go to doctors and they'd treat me like I had some disease. Just because I was, you know, well, over 35, but then over 40. I'm like, no, we're not doing this. Back to my history of, here's a label, let me throw it on you, and you know, you have a problem. I just really was like, you know, this is going to be an empowering thing if I do things at home, really never go to the doctor, have her at home if I can, which luckily I did. And that was a huge like reclamation of, wow, my body isn't broken.
Wow,
you know?
yeah, to go from 10 years old, being like, you have an imbalance. You're like, oh, I am in my 40s, I got pregnant naturally, I had a home birth. Like, wow, to reclaim your health, your vibrancy, your divinity.
My sexuality, all of that.
Wow, good for you.
Yeah.
That's big.
It was huge.
And what role do you think coaching played in that reclamation? Are you being able to do that?
I mean, it was everything. I mean, coaching and especially spiritual psychology, which I studied, and it has been such and then trauma work and somatic work and like all the things have been just integral in me just really letting go of so much, remembering who I am, not seeing myself as a problem that needs to be fixed, not seeing myself as broken, and also like letting go of so much through inner child work, through trauma work, through, I mean, everything that I've done. It just cleared out a lot of space, you know, because we don't only hold our own stuff, we hold lineage stuff. So whatever we do to really clear patterns and clear trauma and really get to deep forgiveness, but not spiritual bypass, because I think a lot of people forgive, but they do the spiritual bypass route where they haven't really gotten at the rawness of the anger and the rage and the grief and the sadness that's really, and the shame that's really there. So I was able to go through all of that and express it, and then ultimately get to forgiveness, which I think cleared things lineage-wise as well. And what's interesting is, like, in my family, my sister, my cousins all have had boys, and I had the first girl, which I knew I was going to have. Like, I knew I was going to have, because there was just so much feminine lineage that needed to be cleared that felt hard at the time, but so empowering, you know?
What felt hard about it?
It just felt big. Like it felt really ingrained.
Yeah, like this is unsolvable.
Yeah, unsolvable. And I don't just mean feminine lineage from my line. I mean just like the collective as well. It just felt like a lot of codependence, a lot of martyrdom, a lot of like playing small, a lot of like resentment and repression and suppression of everything from sexuality to emotion to career ambitions. Like everything just felt very, very tight. And so much of the work I did just felt like things just opened up again. You know, and my journey into the divine feminine and essentially into motherhood was, you know, one thing that really tripped me up along the way was thinking my expression of the feminine had to look like other people's. Because I would see other women and they just were like, you know, doing their goddess dances and wearing the flowy things and just doing things that I was like, I don't really want to do that. Like, I don't want to do a moon dance naked, like
I don't
around
want
a
to put
fire.
my period blood on my face.
I do not want to do that. Someone tried to convince me that it was going to be life changing, and I'm like, I don't think so.
I support you
and
in
maybe
that.
I'm a prude, but that was so much of me, like understanding that the divine feminine isn't about pressure. It's not about pressure, and it's not about comparison, and it's not about doing it the way other women do it. It's about like feeling how it expresses through us individually. So once I really found how the feminine expresses through me and tried to make it look like other women that I labeled as feminine, that really like taught femininity or whatever, when I really went within and was like, how does she want to express through me? Like, what does that look like through me? That's when so much cleared. So it was both like the models that I had and the programming I had, and then also, because we can be influenced by, you know, our programming, but also like what we're looking toward and think that we need to look like that versus really coming inside and going, wait a second, all the answers are inside me. How does this want to express through me? What's my version of this?
So what did you discover? Like, how does the divine feminine want to express through you?
Well, for me, it was just this like natural compassion and softness that I have, and power, but like the power of real discernment, like of really just trusting my intuition and knowing how powerful that is and just not wavering on that. And also radical self-acceptance. Like I found that confidence came from radical self-acceptance. That's where it came from. And, you know, I'm always finding ways that it expresses through me. It's kind of a tough question to answer because it just does. You know what I mean? Like it just
is.
It just is. It's kind of hard to put words on it.
Yeah, it's like when you're in meditation, you aren't doing anything or being, it doesn't feel blissful, it just is.
It just is.
And so because meditation, you're accessing the unmanifest, you're accessing the collective, and I feel like that is what comes through us when we're channeling. It's that divinity, and it just is.
It just is.
Because you already are God. And it's like when those stories and conditionings fall away, then it's just the expression of pure Christine.
Yeah. I think a lot of walls came down. I think I had a lot of I know I had a lot of walls of protection around me. And in my single years, a lot of dating coaches would tell me, Christine, you're too much in your masculine. And I would believe it and think, okay, well, I need to be more my feminine. And then I try to do the things like go on a date and not talk about myself or, you know, shit like that. Or not talk about my career or just, anyway. And then I finally, within my own meditation and my own work, I realized I'm actually not in my masculine, I'm in hypervigilance because my nervous system isn't regulated. I don't feel safe. And so I'm just doing a lot and controlling a lot and being hypervigilant because I'm in a trauma response pretty much most of the time and I don't even realize it.
Oh,
it has
God.
nothing to do with my masculine.
I think that's me.
Oh, I still do that.
I'm definitely doing that. But thank you for naming that, because I mean, obviously, I know I have hypervigilance. I know I do have a very well-developed masculine, but I don't know that I've spent time really looking at or discerning what is a healthy expression of masculine and what is hypervigilance.
Yeah.
That feels like an important one.
For me, it's the come from.
What does that mean?
So hypervigilance for me comes from one, like thinking I need to do something or thinking there's a problem I need to fix, or having anxiety that I just don't know how to manage, and so I'm just going to do, or like needing to live up to something or old pressure or whatever. Masculine energy to me feels like a response. So I know I'm in my healthy masculine when my feminine has given a directive, like I've felt something, and then my masculine handles the execution of it, which is way different than when I'm in hypervigilance. It's like, it feels more jittery and more spastic. I don't look spastic. I look extremely effective. But inside of myself, there's a kind of energy to it.
Ooh, okay. I want to double click on this because I mean, selfishly, I just want to be coached right now. Do you feel available to
Of course.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So this, I'm trying to think of, okay, this is getting a little vulnerable talking about money, but like, for example, like on our call the other day, I was asking about people's profit margins, and people were sharing like, oh, mine's this number, and I discovered that my profit margins are like much lower than the rest of the people in our group, and I immediately I felt like a failure, I felt disappointed, I felt embarrassed, and then I could feel that hypervigilance kick in, where I was like, oh, I have to fix something, there's something to fix here.
Right.
And then I'm looking at like ad spend and blah, 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 you know, like going down the P&L from this place of fear and lack and scarcity. But I definitely have a story of like, well, this is just good business. Like, this is just, if you're going to be a responsible CEO, like you have to do this. So I can fully justify it. But if I'm being honest, it comes from like, well, I want to have the highest profit margins and like I want to be good. I want to be successful. And so I would just love any feedback or anything you see there.
Yeah, no, I thank you for the vulnerability. So when that happened and you saw everybody's profit margins and yours were lower, what did you make that mean about yourself?
I made it mean that I'm not good at business, that I'm not trusting my intuition, that I'm allowing myself to be pulled by other people's desires, other people's dreams, or maybe like too, like I'll just say like bullied by like even employees or like, you know, just like, oh, or here's a fun one. I made it mean that I'm like running a nonprofit for Mark Zuckerberg. Just like taking all of the money and just giving it right over to ad spend. That's like on the surface, but like deeper.
So like the core belief that would be underneath all of that. I'm not
like,
what?
I'm not, I guess it's like, I'm not good enough.
Yeah. And what feeling comes up when you say that?
Like unworthiness or embarrassment.
Shame?
Yeah, I guess embarrassment and shame are very similar. Yeah.
And does that remind you of anything?
Does the shame remind me of anything?
That feeling. You don't even have to name it, just that feeling. I'm not feeling good enough and the yuckiness that comes with it.
I can like feel into a flavor of reaching.
Okay, then don't reach.
No, I'm saying like a reaching that I do in my life. Like that like when I feel that embarrassment or not enoughness, like I'll reach like back when I was acting. Or even sometimes in friend groups.
Yeah. So a long time ago, part of you decided, when I feel this icky feeling, I need to do something about it. I can't just be with the feeling. So that was either a coping strategy or that was modeled for you, or a long time ago, because this has been in your operating system for a while, when that feeling of embarrassment or panic or I'm not enough or whatever, that real kind of vulnerability feeling of, oh shit, like I may not be good enough and I need to fix it, like right away. This is not like urgent, 4-alarm fire type of thing. That's been there a while. So what I'm curious about is, if you think back to when all of your operating system was forming, which is childhood, do you have any sense of when that developed and why?
Yeah, I mean, what's so fascinating is that specifically on the good enough and the worthiness piece, like I felt very confident, very good enough, very worthy, like in myself on stage, like I loved acting, I loved dancing, I loved my friends. I was always like, good grades, the dance captain, blah, blah, blah. And I liked those things.
But where did you learn resilience and failure? If you were good at everything, where did you learn how to fail?
Oh. Yeah, I didn't really. But I would not say I'm expert at failing.
Right. You're used to being really good at things, Emily.
Yeah.
Like really good.
Yeah, I love it.
Who doesn't? Right?
Yeah, I definitely have that fixed mindset.
Yeah.
I'm like, growth mindset.
Yeah.
Overrated.
Yeah.
But have you tried being an expert at things?
I know. I get it. But like, really, you were so good at everything, especially as a young kid. You really never really had to fail. Never had to not be the best at something. So when, like, especially in a group situation where that comes up, where like you're not the best or you're not good in some level, it's like, wait, this is not how things are. This is wrong.
It like challenges my deep identity.
Yeah, it does. It does. It does, because you don't fail, and that's part of who you are.
And just a name that like maybe obvious is that, my dad was alcoholic, manic depressive, bipolar. And so I'm sure there's some obvious thing that I can't see right now, but like there was a lot of parenting. Like I was good at things because there was no room for me to be.
Well, you couldn't be a kid.
Right.
Because when you have a parent that's that unpredictable and that unstable, you have to parentify yourself. And you have to be good at things, because if you don't, then he's going to get mad. It could trigger something. Like there's
it doesn't
a whole
feel safe.
thing. It doesn't feel safe. And kids that don't have adequate parenting will overcompensate and become like extra good at things because you're making up for a lot, But you didn't really, and okay, we're talking about dad, so there's the masculine, right? So you didn't have like a healthy masculine modeled for you that would just hold you when you failed or hold you when you weren't being the best and like show you also what healthy masculine looks like in the world, So what I see is an opportunity for when something comes up where you're not the best or you're not living up to standards or whatever, kind of going, wow, this is an opportunity for me not to be good at something. I'm actually not the best right now. Okay, how do I want to be with that? Like, can I just be with that? Can I be in the suffering of that? Because one of the things I'm learning in all the parenting podcasts I'm listening to is about not rescuing our kids and letting them suffer and teaching them resilience. And so instead of just kind of being with whatever comes up for you around a situation like that, you want to go into like, I need to fix it and hypervigilance. I'm not saying don't take action. I am saying consider where the action is being taken from and actually sit with, wow, how does it feel not to be the best? How does it feel to be the one in the group whose numbers weren't the highest? Like, let me just be with that for a moment.
Or like objectively the lowest. Let's just be clear. I'm just making light, but yes, to really sit in that.
Just to really sit in it and to like have your feelings around it. Because I would guess as a kid, there was a lot of bypassing your actual feelings and just let me go right into action. Yeah. And again, that's going to look masculine, but really that's a trauma response.
Fuck. Okay, thanks. Thanks for showing me where my work is. I've got so much work to do.
Oh, we all do. Oh my gosh. I'm like a hypervigilant twin over here, so I completely get it. Mine shows up a lot in motherhood more than it does business.
Interesting.
But, one last thing I'll say to you is like in those moments, be with that little girl inside, the little you, and like let her know it's okay. Like let her know it's really okay to not be the best, to not like fix it right away, to be in the uncertainty, to be in the I don't know, to be in the I need help, to be in the this feels heavy, I don't want to fix it. Like let her have her feelings around it. Yeah. Because when you keep skipping over that and going into the hypervigilance, it just perpetuates that and she continues to feel like her feelings are neglected.
Yeah. Yeah, when you said that, like, it's okay to say I need help, like, that really brought up the tears. Yeah. And it's like, oh, that feels like that. Like why don't I feel like I can ask for help?
Right.
It's like, well, because he needed help. Like, he was in a position where he needed support.
Right.
And so it's just like that reparenting yourself.
Reparenting, and even with overpaying staff and everything, that's the pleaser. Mm-hmm. That's the, like, codependent. That's the child of an alcoholic. It's all normal. It all makes so much sense. And that's what I love about coaching and psychology, is that we can look at things and go, of course I do that. Of course I do that, given my upbringing, given my background. Like, so let me have some freaking compassion for myself and understand that I missed a critical piece. Because if we look at, for example, Erikson's stages of development, which we don't have to get into right now.
What's that?
Erikson's stages of development, they're the psychosocial stages of development, like the things that we're naturally supposed to learn at certain ages. Like right now, I have a 20-month-old, and she's in autonomy versus shame and doubt. So she's all about her will right now, right? And so there's different developmental stages where if we fail at that stage, meaning our needs weren't met by our primary caregivers, by, you know, the social construct which we lived in, we sort of like fail at it, right? And so especially like in adolescence, there's lots of stages around identity, role confusion, like really knowing who we are. And that's when we develop a lot of these compensatory strategies. So even that like hypervigilance and the achieving thing, which I relate to, it's because some part of us didn't feel safe just to be ourselves.
Yeah.
So we had to like go and do things. And when we can understand where it comes from, like I got stuck in therapy a lot, just knowing I could analyze something and know where it comes from, but didn't know what to do with it. And that's why I love about coaching, especially how I coach, is that, okay, we can look at where something comes from, and then we can actually do something about it. And I'm not saying therapy doesn't do that, but I think a lot of us can get stuck in the analysis and the explanation, and we don't actually know how to shift something.
Yeah.
And for me, so much of that is the inner child work, somatic work, trauma work, emotional release work, you know, breath work, like really getting in the body and getting at those places, because just talking about our past, it just doesn't cut it.
Like this feels like so related to the divine feminine that we were talking about, that there can be, you know, the, I won't say hyper, but just the intellectualization of consciousness that can happen through the mind, which is the more masculine, versus the embodiment of it, which is the feminine. Yeah. And all of these things that you said, I mean, the somatic release, the expression, the trauma work, that stuff is stored in the body. In order to heal it, we have to almost circumnavigate the brain and go into the body. And that's been, I'd say, my big journey over the past 3 years, is that even with meditation, it was this ascension plan. It was this like, let's increase consciousness. Let's go to God. And it was a very mental technique. And then in the past 3 years, like having this whole, I guess, you know, now that I understand that Kundalini just means the embodiment of consciousness.
Right.
And actually like, oh, I can manifest with my brain, but I can also manifest with my heart and my hoo-ha. Like, wait, I can bring this up into my body. Yeah. I can feel things and express things in my body. And I think having been a singer and dancer and actor, like those tools were very available to me. So the second I was like, oh, wait, we can heal this way. I was like, oh, let's go. But I want to bring it back to, you said the inner child work is really important. And I think in my experience, so linked to coaching. Like you can't coach without inner child work. You can't really do I mean, you could do inner child work without a coach, but it would be very challenging. Yeah. So if we're going to advocate for, so if this is like, why isn't everyone coaching? Yeah. I think you could almost make that synonymous with why isn't everyone doing inner child work? So let's say I've never heard of either. I've never done either. Can you just give me like the sales pitch for coaching and inner child work?
I'll try. Well, I mean, there's all different kinds of coaching out there. There's all different kinds. And, you know, when I became a coach, I was really clear I wanted to be able to help people with their past. So that's why I went and studied spiritual psychology and consciousness, health and healing, and trauma work and somatic work, and I mean, personality patterns, attachment theory, all of it. Because I wanted to understand myself first and foremost, but I felt like if I was going to help people achieve goals, I had to remove what was in the way. Otherwise, you're just kind of putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg. I mean, it's just not going to really work. So to me, coaching, the way I see it, I can't define all coaching, but the way that I love to coach and the way that we train coaches at Elementum Coaching Institute, which is the coaching institute I co-founded, is that we work holistically. So we work mind, body, emotion, spirit. We work all of it, and the past. And a lot of people will say therapy is different from coaching because therapy helps you with your past and coaching should only help you with your present and your future. I disagree.
I disagree too.
And again, like Coaches have different training. There's certain things that I refer out for because I don't have the training for it. So there are guidelines in it. And even when we train coaches, we're clear about, okay, where you don't go with a client. But if you have the somatic training and the inner child training, like you can take your client places, especially if they're, a pretty, like, I'm not talking about people that are clinically depressed, bipolar, like that's a different conversation. But to me, coaching really is about empowering someone to find all the inner resources within. And I mean, this is like dangerous to talk about because therapists watching are going to go, oh my gosh, she threw therapy under the bus. I'm not throwing therapy under the bus. There are some schools of therapy and therapeutic approaches that are very much about labeling and finding a problem and diagnosing it. Even if you go to a psychiatrist, you get a diagnosis code, all those kinds of things. Helpful to a certain extent, but can kind of keep someone in a box of like, this is my label. Whereas I look at people as they have all the inner resources they need to get through whatever they want to get through. And since I come from a spiritual psychology bend or lens, I'm more, what is this soul seeking to learn? Not what happened to this person that's made them the way they are. I'm curious about what's happened in someone's life, but more like, what is their soul curriculum? And from a coaching perspective, everything happens for you. Everything, which is really hard to swallow at times. I mean, there's sometimes in my life, like right now I can't sleep. And I'm like, why is this happening for me? This feels like absolute torture. So there's definitely times where, it doesn't feel like that. But if we can look at like everything happens for us, even if we don't like it, doesn't mean we have to love it. Doesn't mean we have to be grateful for it, but everything happens for us and everything is happening to get our soul to evolve. Everything. I believe we pick our parents on a spiritual level. We have soul contracts with the people that we come in contact with. And we're always wanting to ascend. And that ascension isn't just through meditation. That ascension is through getting in the body and dealing with the stuff that we didn't have the tools for at the time. So if we bring inner child work into that, inner child isn't some like woo-woo term. It's a real psychological reality. We store everything in our subconscious mind. So I'm sure you've heard that 90 to 95% of everything we do is subconsciously driven. Only 5 to 10, if we're lucky, % of what we do is like consciously chosen.
Man, it really makes the whole nature versus nurture argument seem totally obsolete. And like, what doesn't even matter? Because what doesn't matter what you were born with, because all that was being shaped by your nurturing. So 90 to 95% is subconscious. Fascinating.
Yes. And what coaching does is lower. So if we think about the iceberg theory, right, you can only see 5 to 10% of an iceberg. What coaching does is lower the water, so more of it is revealed. So like, because I've been doing this work for so long, I can do something and go, oh my gosh, I know exactly where that's coming from because I know the subconscious trigger that's going off in that moment. But 20 years ago, I didn't have that awareness and I'd just be caught in a loop, just caught in a pattern and not know how to pull myself out of it. And so much of coaching and inner child work is helping pull us out of the programming. But anyway, back to inner child work, it is a psychological reality. We all have the stored memories of our childhood in our subconscious mind. You don't need to remember your childhood to do inner child work. But it is about reconnecting to that part of us that's innocent and precious and magical and intuitive and playful and emotive and not self-conscious, but that also has stored a lot of pain. That has stored a lot of big feelings, that has been through a lot of trauma, that has heard things and seen things and had things done to them that just were really, really hard. And most children don't have a way to really move that through their body. So it just gets stuck.
Well, I would argue that a lot of kids do have it, and then we train it out of them.
Right, exactly.
Right, like your daughter at 20 months is probably great at feeling her feelings.
Oh, she's great. She stood by the back door yesterday because she wanted to drive my car for 10 minutes and cried. 10 minutes. And I just stood there and I said, I know you're really mad at mommy. It's okay to be angry and we're not driving the car right now.
Oh my gosh.
And I just sat there on the floor when she raged about not being able to drive the car at 20 months old.
But this is a lot of the work. So in Sacred Secret, we move through, like before we even touch like pleasure or ecstasy, we move people through emotional alchemy, which is giving people tools to rage their rage and to cry their tears. Because it's like, if you spent 40 years like numbing your pain, good luck feeling your ecstasy. And even though it's fast, just I give people the model, like, go into your inner toddler.
Yeah.
It's like, they're great at feeling their feelings. Like, and then they're fine.
Yeah, I call it the temper tantrum technique. I write about that in my book. Like,
Oh,
I
cool.
literally call it the temper tantrum
Which
technique.
book do you write about that?
Expectation Hangover.
Okay.
Yeah, which I just re-recorded the audio.
Ooh.
Yeah, because
Okay.
the first time it came out in 2014. I'm really due for another book. And someone else wrote it. I read it. So I re-narrated it and added some things in.
And so can you give us a little window in? What's the temper tantrum technique?
So the temper tantrum technique is basically what you're describing. So kids are wonderful at riding the waves of feelings. Like, I like to look at the emotional level as the ocean, because that's what it is. It's water. And even if you look at the tarot, the water is emotion. And so a toddler or a kid will get like really upset about something and then really mad about something and then kind of cry and then whimper a little bit and then rock a little bit, and then they'll be done. They'll just ride the wave of the emotion until it's complete. And if you just let them know they're safe and keep them safe, they'll eventually like get to the other side of it. And as adults, we have completely forgotten how to do that. We have completely forgotten how to let the inner child express.
Yeah.
We can be so bad at feeling our feelings.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why we have addiction and social media, and we have so many ways to not feel.
Yeah.
So many ways to not feel. And we've forgotten our feelings so much, so we're terrified of them. I mean, that's so much of my work with people. When I teach my women's retreat, I do a huge grief release and a huge anger burn, and this is like hours, the whole arc. And a lot of them are just so scared to go into their feelings for a couple reasons. One, they're afraid, well, gosh, if I go into this black hole, am I ever going to get out? Like, am I going to go crazy?
Yeah, if I put my toe in that feeling, it's going to be a tsunami.
It's going to be a tsunami. I'm going to go crazy. I'm, going to break my brain.
Like, lose it,
I'm going to
break
lose it.
down.
Yeah, all that stuff. And then the other big fear is, okay, I grew up in anger or chaos. I don't want to yell. I don't want to get at my rage. And by doing that, like, we're depriving ourselves of one of the pleasures of being human, which is emotional expression. Yeah. It's really, like, as adults, we kind of look at, okay, I've got sex, I've got food, I've got, these things, but as pleasure. But we forget that emotional release is part of being human, and it's part of being in a body. Yeah. And it's a really amazing thing. Like, after I facilitate the anger burn, which is like a massive temper tantrum technique at my retreat, the women are just, they have so much vitality and so much passion and so much power. And I really want to differentiate between a cathartic release and a true emotional release. Because cathartic releases are great, rage rooms are great, going to an event and screaming is great, like, you get a good release. But unless you're actually attaching like words and memories with it and like going back to an inner child moment where you didn't get to express, or a moment in your life where you didn't get to express, and using those words and getting that emotion out, then you're kind of just having a cathartic release. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you for that. So I just want to say it back, because this is very germane to the work I'm developing.
Yeah.
So, like, I could have people in a room doing emotional alchemy, and they could just be like raging and screaming and crying, and like good for the body, like something's being released.
Yeah, it's helpful.
Better than shots of tequila.
For sure.
But if we really want to reparent ourselves, we want to actually reprogram a story or rewire the inner child, it needs to be connected to something that did not have the time to release.
Yeah, we need to connect it to what the rage is about. Otherwise, it's sort of just like a cathartic release.
So I love your advisement on this. So what I'm connecting it to, because to me, Sacred Secret is an embodied manifesting tool. So for me, it's all about like moving people towards the dream and then using their pleasure to pray. But usually there's some sort of a sadness of disappointment for a dream that didn't come, or an anger of like why it hasn't shown up yet, or some story that's like keeping us from the dream. So usually it's like the protector parts that are protecting ourselves from the dream, or the sadness that's protecting ourselves from the disappointment. So I'm connecting it to that, but it's not necessarily from the inner child. What are your thoughts on that?
Wow, do you know IFS, Integrated Family? Okay, so the protector parts are always protecting an exile, usually, right? So the protector is standing in front of the inner child, right? So, Protector parts only will move out of the way if they know like their job is still going to be done.
That they still have a job to do, or that someone else
that
is going to?
their job is still going to be done. So like if
Something
my
else is gonna
job,
protect.
if my job as a protector, like if I have a protector part that sabotages. So like I want to start my business, or I want to put myself out there, and then I do stuff, I'm all ready, and then a part comes in and just sabotages it. I don't do it, or I procrastinate, or something like that. That protector part, if I like brought that protector part in and I had a conversation with the protector part and really asked like what's its highest intention, it's probably like to keep from judgment, or to keep from shame, or to keep an inner child who at one point expressed and it didn't turn out so well. Because that protector part is like, this is not safe. We're not putting ourselves out there. Like, we don't want to be shamed or hit or judged again. No way. So until that protector part knows that the need to keep the inner child safe is going to be met, it's not going to go away.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So we've got to like work with that protector part to see if it's willing to either do its job in a different way or let another part come in. Or if we go deep enough, then we work with the exiled inner child, which is a little trickier. So that protector part, so like the exiled inner child comes back into like our conscious reality and isn't like so much in our subconscious, that protector part's like, oh, like Big Christine has this part now. I don't have to be so vigilant about protecting.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, that's helpful.
So with Sacred Secret, it would be really great if they, I mean, even if you don't get into the protector pieces, if they could really get really angry at, like, who's told them they can't do stuff in the past? Yeah. Like, where have they been told they're not good enough? Who stifled their expression? Like, who teased them back in the day? Like, who modeled for them that, like, you know, girls just sit back and watch other things, or whatever. Like, what are the things that they're mad about? Yeah. For why they're doing or not doing what they want to do.
Yeah, that's really helpful. If I can get them into this space versus just like the anger that it hasn't happened, but like who told you what happened that created this limiting belief, and then express that feeling through that. That feels really great.
We just never direct anger at ourselves.
Okay.
So we can be like, let's say we cheated and we're really mad at ourselves about that. We can be frustrated. We can be angry with the patterning. We can be angry with the circumstances. We can be angry and sad that the other person's hurting, but we never go into an anger burn being like, I can't believe I did this. I'm a piece of shit. I'm so mad at myself. We never direct that anger inward. And people question me. They say, okay, well then why is it okay to direct the anger outward? Like, well, you're not going up to the person and hitting them. Like, this is you're using your imagination, you're using just your own subconscious and emotional expression to get out what's in there. Or, you know, if we're mad at somebody, like speaking it out of our mouth isn't all of a sudden making it up. Like, it's in our body, and it's so much better to get it out than to hold it in. Like, I have the relationship I have with my parents today because I've written a lot of fuck you letters that I've never mailed, and I've hit a lot of pillows.
God bless the pillows.
Yeah.
God bless them.
Just, getting, talking about what I didn't like that they did or didn't do.
I was once doing Sacred Secret at a workshop. It was like, I don't know, 300 people in a room, and there was these big bean bags, and all of a sudden I look over and there's just like fluff, like flying through the air, and I was like, oh, I'm probably gonna have to pay for that bean bag, but happy, worth it. It's so good. But my question is, like, what if that is the truth? Like, what if the inner dialogue is like, I'm so mad at myself, I messed up, I feel guilty, I feel ashamed. What if that is at least the story that they're interpreting, that they are mad at themselves? What do they do with it then?
So this is where a coach is super helpful. So I'd be really clear that this is a story. So the story I'm telling myself is this. And then I'd really let myself say those things. And then I'd say, how does it feel to say those things? Like, how does it feel to say that about myself? And then maybe picture the inner child. How does the inner child feel about you saying those things about yourself? Because often the doorway to compassion is through the eyes of the inner child. So one of my favorite tools is I have a picture of me as a little girl that I carry on my phone, that I carry around with me. And if I'm really like doing that self-critic, self-beat thing, I'll look at her, that will ignite compassion. And then it's like, okay, why we tend to do that is because we think it's going to prevent us from making the same mistake. Or if we feel shame and guilt about something.
Oh, we think beating ourselves up or being angry at ourselves, we think it will prevent us from making the same mistake.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or if we feel shame or guilt about something, if we're beating ourselves up, then at least like we should because we did something wrong.
Right, I'm still a good person.
Yeah, I'm still a good person.
I did
at least
something
I'm beating
bad,
myself up.
so at least I feel guilty.
Yeah, at least I think I'm awful now.
Okay, so you're saying like this is where a coach comes in handy. We don't want to direct that ourselves, but we want to see that it's a story.
See the story and take ownership. So ownership is different than self-beat. Ownership is, I cheated, I hurt another person, I lied, I wasn't honest. That wasn't a great thing to do. I was coming from a place of fear. I was being irresponsible. I was being weak, like whatever it is, like ownership. And what can I learn from it? Versus I'm awful. I just need to shame myself for the rest of my life. I need to beat myself up for the rest of my life. That doesn't go anywhere. And there's no ownership in that. There's no ownership in self-beat.
Ooh, I love this. There's no ownership in self-beat, so it doesn't actually change the patterning.
No.
It actually makes it worse.
Makes it worse.
Because now you love yourself less.
Right, and you're victimizing yourself. So now you're in victim, which is going to get you nowhere.
Oof, that's good. So why isn't everyone coaching?
Well, I think there's a couple reasons. So one, people don't think they need it. A lot of people just don't think they need it. They think their life is fine. Now, I have a coach. I have so many tools, and I have a coach. I have a coach specifically she coaches me on a lot of things, but she's a coach that specializes in high-achieving women who become mothers. And I'm like, hello. And she's great because she always says, Christine, I know you know this, because sometimes we can be hard to coach because we know so much.
Like I know intellectually all day long.
Oh yeah, but just having someone that like holds that space of compassion and also calling you forward, but also with training and tools is so helpful. So I think a lot of us think we don't need it because we just can think our way through something, or we're strong enough, or our life is okay. We just kind of don't think we need it. A lot of people think that it's a frivolous investment, right? Because coaching can be expensive. It's not something that insurance covers, and it's a frivolous investment. Well, I don't even know how much money I've spent on myself coaching-wise. Way more money than I've spent on anything else in my life. My personal growth budget, who even knows? It's a lot.
Do you budget it though? Do you say, I'm going to allocate X amount? Or are you just like, when it feels
When it feels aligned, I never think about it. And that's always how I've been. And I haven't ever struggled financially in that department because I've always believed I'm my best ROI. Like, I'd much rather invest in an awesome coach for me than a Facebook person to do ads or whatever. Because I know that as I shift my frequency, like everything else in my life is going to change.
Ooh,
so that's
girl,
always
you might have just helped I think you just solved my profit margins. What if I take my ads budget and put it into some coaching?
Yeah.
I mean, to be clear, I do have a therapist and 2 coaches,
Yeah.
but I get what you're saying. It's like what unfelt feelings, what stuff still needs to come to the surface as I change my calibration, like what shifts in the magnetism.
Exactly. Because that is more powerful, especially if we're coming from the divine feminine. That is way more powerful than anything we can do on the goal line, on the 3D. Like it just shifts things so much quicker. And ultimately, it's cheaper. Like, ultimately.
I mean, way cheaper.
Way cheaper.
If I were to show you what I'm spending on ads, I don't know how we got to this being like a podcast about Facebook ads, but here we are.
No, I love it. I mean, I love it all. Like, I just love the whole human experience. And then there's a very real reason why people don't do coaching is they can't afford it. Like, they're just wanting to get by. It's a luxury thing. They just can't. And I see that. I appreciate that. That's why I do pro bono stuff. That's why we have scholarships and sliding scales. And why I'm such an advocate of more people doing coaching. Because people that can afford it, even if it's a stretch, but invest in it a little bit, it just starts to shift the consciousness of the planet. And then we have more capacity because we're not so stuck in our own stuff. That's when we have the capacity to actually serve and help other people. Because so much of the helping other people, it can come from our own pain and our own anger. And it can be helpful, but it's not as helpful if we clear out our stuff and then we go to, okay, who am I going to serve? Like, where can I really serve here?
Oof.
You know, and that's one of the reasons I do the podcast where I coach on the air, is because I'm like, well, how can I offer something free where people can get coaching or at least kind of hear it, that like all they really need is access to Wi-Fi, you know?
Yeah. Oh, this feels so good. So first of all, I just want to advocate for your podcast, Over It and On With It, with Christine Hassler. You've been doing the show for a long time.
Yeah, almost 10 years.
Almost 10 years you've had a podcast. Godspeed, God bless. That's amazing. Where you're coaching people live on the air every week? Or how?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I do it with a $65 microphone in my laptop.
God bless. God bless. Just here we are in this giant
No, this
studio.
is amazing, but it just
Different
goes
things.
to show, like, there's so many different expressions, and there's not one way to do things.
Yeah.
Whether it's a podcast or anything else, there's just not one way. There's your way.
And just the fact that you're doing this, it feels like an act of service. Like
Yeah.
that this podcast is an act of service. And the thing I want to highlight that you just said was, like, if we're all swimming in our own stuff, if we're all like dancing with our triggers and in overwhelm and like being like not paying attention to, not listening to our inner children, not giving them the microphone to feel their feelings, how on earth are we going to have capacity and spaciousness to hold space for someone else when we don't know how to hold space for ourselves?
Yeah.
And so that to me feels like the counter argument to this is a frivolous investment or I don't have time or space. It's like, okay, well, how on earth are you going to serve your kids, your employees, your partner, your family if you are constantly swimming in your own triggers and upsets?
Yeah. Yeah, and we want to make sure that any kind of advocacy doesn't come from reactivity.
What does that mean?
Well, if we're reactive to something, like we're really mad about something, and anger is so useful. Like, it's so useful. It can be so useful to really like get a fire lit underneath us. You know, when we see people in any way oppressed or abused or trafficked or any of those things, like, of course we're going to get pissed about it. And of course we want to do something about it and be an advocate and be a voice, and all those things are amazing. But if we're coming from reactivity, like if we're coming from that place of this is wrong and I need to fix it, most likely there's a trigger within us. And energetically, we're kind of coming at it with the same energy it was created in. Whereas if we can come at it with a different lens of like not a right or wrong, good or bad lens, but love needs to be applied here. You know, this area needs more love. Okay, what are we gonna do? And love is not this like, let me just sit and pray and sing kumbaya and like sprinkle fairy dust. Love is incredibly powerful. But when we're coming from that reactivity, we're more coming from fear.
Yeah.
But when we're coming from love, that's where, like, to me, real solutions are born.
So what would you say to the planet right now? I feel like we're in this moment of real reactivity. You know, we have these intergenerational patterns playing out in very big ways, you know, and like, you know, name a region of the planet, but right now at this particular moment of recording, the Middle East is really hot.
Right.
But, and I'm not asking you to like go into foreign policy right now, but I am curious if you could coach collectively the species on the reaction that people are having to this many generations of trauma and upset. And what I'm seeing is exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
This is wrong. Like, you see something that is fucking atrocious. Like,
Yeah, I know.
horrible.
I can't even like open my Instagram.
And so like that's a real thing. There's something horrible happening.
Yeah.
But then if the reaction is like more horror, more fear, more shame, more right, wrong, more good, bad, it's like we're perpetuating these cycles. And I know this is an extraordinarily complex subject. It feels like the philosophies are simple. The human history and politics and emotions are complex.
Yeah.
And so I guess, if you could share like one piece of knowledge of how to apply more love to a situation that feels really horrifying, like how would you coach someone through that?
Oh, well, I mean, collectively, I just think we are just living on thousands of years of suppression and repression of the human spirit, the human psyche, the human soul. And we're seeing what happens when you suppress that for so long. And I do think we are a bit of a bridge generation between, I think, what is going to be a different time on the planet. I don't think it's going to be for a while, but we are in the upset. We're in the temper tantrum in so many ways of the world. And it's, there's no arguing it's atrocious. Like we can't, if someone said, okay, Christine, you're honestly going to say there's no good, bad, right, or wrong, like the human part of me is going to say, absolutely, there's good, bad, right, and wrong in this situation. Absolutely. However, by continuing to make it wrong or think it's bad, it's just more of that. Mm-hmm. So what I say is have your reactivity, have your big feelings about it, have your rage. My last women's retreat was October 13th. So it was right when all of this was happening. Mm-hmm. And I said to the women there, like, have your own personal experience, but also like have the collective experience. Like be really pissed off, get that emotion out. Don't just talk about it or write comments on Instagram. Like go through the reactivity and then see what's on the other side. Yeah. And that's gonna be different for everybody. For some people, it's gonna be like, okay, like right now, all I can do is just pray. I can be different. Some people, it may be like, I'm actually gonna go and do something about it. But first, we need to have our big feelings about it. So I don't think we should be bypassing any of it. I think like have our feelings about it, but feelings are not just talking about it. Feelings are letting your rage out.
Yeah, this feels really, really important. Like if we look at it through the lens of the upsets, the temper tantrums, like the explosions that we're seeing on the planet, if we look at those as a byproduct of thousands of years of repressed emotions, tens of thousands of years, then that feels actually really helpful as a lens of like, okay, I'm seeing something horrific. I can see that as a result of unfelt feelings. Yeah. So rather than me not feeling my feelings and taking it out of my typewriter and blaming or shaming someone else, can I just put my phone down, feel the feelings, go into the rage, go into the grief, go into the mourning, and then see what's on the other side? Why do you think people are so scared? Do you think they're scared to see what's on the other side, or do you think they just have not been modeled or don't feel safe enough to feel the feelings?
Both. And I think people just don't know how to feel feelings. I just released a podcast on how to do an anger burn because I get so many questions about it.
Great.
Because it is like, okay, what do I do with my feelings and what do I do at the end of them? And like, I have no idea. And so, I think it's just easier to be mad at someone else and to be mad at something else than to go after like what has really hurt you in your life. And people think, oh, that's selfish. Like, how am I gonna like be mad at my alcoholic dad when babies are being killed? It's like, okay, well, you're still mad at your alcoholic dad. Like, we can't, that's still a reality. And you dealing with it doesn't mean you don't care about this over here. And so that's a suppression and distraction tactic that a lot of people do is like, oh, there's this worse stuff going on over here, so I can't, my stuff, ugh, who needs to deal with that? Like, it's just, I'd be selfish.
High class problems.
Yes, I'd be self-indulgent to deal with that. This is like so much worse. And yes, on a scale, it could be so much worse, but that doesn't mean your stuff wasn't bad for you at the time. Like no 5-year-old whose mom is, neglectful sits and goes, well, the kid down the street is getting beat up, so I'll be grateful for my mom. No 5-year-old thinks that. Yeah. He just thinks, why doesn't mommy love me? I feel so sad, So we have to be with our own experience, have compassion for the world, have gratitude for ways in which we're privileged, ways in which we've had it easier than other people, but not use that as a reason not to do our own work. Yeah. And the other thing that is just so important for us to see with everything going on in the world is how powerful programming is and how powerful belief systems are. Like if we look at what's going on in the Middle East, so much of it is about what people believe and conditioning, like thousands of years of conditioning. So when people like ask me, why do I need to do deep belief work? Why do I need to, do deep programming work? Can't I just take different action? I'm like, oof, you're not going to be able to take different action unless you really challenge and question these beliefs and change them. because what we believe just programs us to do things that half the time we're not even aware that we're doing.
It's that 85% or 90%.
Exactly.
Oh, I really just want to double click on and restate what you said of just because someone else is suffering more than you, that does not give you a get out of jail free card. That does not give you a bypass card for not doing your work.
Right.
As a matter of fact, like what I said last night, we did a Sacred Secret event here in Austin, and I was like, rage for those who can't.
Yeah.
Grieve for those who cannot, because there are so many people who are actually in a space where it is physically unsafe for them to rage or cry, or they're in a trauma response right now that is a healthy response to a traumatic situation.
Right.
And they don't have the luxury of feeling those feelings. And it's like, I think if we were to flip it as like, oh, feeling my feelings is a privilege, it is a luxury.
Yeah.
And so let me take advantage of it for myself and for the collective.
Yeah.
I think that would be an interesting reframe versus, oh, it's selfish, which is really just, like you said, a distraction or diversionary tactic because we don't want to feel the feelings.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I your husband just got out of a darkness retreat. I went to the same darkness retreat in,
Oh, you did?
I don't remember, so at some point this year. So 5 days in, complete isolation, darkness, and I went in very much, I had a really cute agenda of going into the darkness to transmute my judgment. Like I was gonna feel my judgment and then transmute it.
How are you planning to do that?
I didn't know. Like I didn't really have have a plan for how, but I just figured like that was like my intention or my prayer going in. Because like I was recognizing my patterns of judgment, judging other people, which means I'm judging myself. But what I realized, and so we're like day 1, day 2, day 3, and finally, and what was great is that it's silent, like no one can hear you. So, and even the guy would come by once a day to drop off food, and he'd be like, no one can hear you.
Oh, wow.
And so I just fucking rage, like screaming, crying, screaming, crying. So we're now on day 4.5. Like I'm about to be leaving. I'm still screaming and crying. And I was like, uh-oh, I'm gonna leave this cave like a lot angrier and sadder than I came in. But then I realized that I was like, oh, I'm feeling these with an agenda to transmute them. Like, oh, they actually just want to be felt.
They just want to be felt.
And to your point earlier, and this has been my big learning in birthing Sacred Secret, because we teach the thing we need to know the most. And so the things I'm learning is that, and I was very much teaching emotional alchemy, is like, oh, we'll feel the rage and feel the sadness to get to the ecstasy, to get to the pleasure, to transmute it. And then in going through this, I've realized like, oh, you can find ecstasy in the expression of the rage. You can find bliss in the expression of the grief. And last night, someone quoted, I don't know who the originator of this quote is, but we'll find it. And he said that bliss is any emotion fully felt. And I've never heard, have you heard that quote before? Feels so good and true and succinct. And
fully felt with full permission, not to have to do anything or reveal anything or turn into anything or transmute anything.
And how do you as a coach create that safety or that permission for your clients?
Compassion. Like just so much compassion and non-judgment. That was the biggest gift Mona, my first coach, gave to me. Like I remember the first session going and sitting in her son's race car bunk bed. That's what she put me in for our first session. She knew I was like wound tight. She's like, I gotta shake this girl up. So she was like so unprofessional because she could read me like a book. So I'm sitting there in his race car bunk bed and telling her like my list of problems and diagnosis and all those things. And she's like, baby, there's nothing wrong with you. And I was like,
I just told you all my
I'm
numbers.
like, were you listening? There's a lot wrong. That's why I'm here.
List.
Yeah, so I'm writing this check for. And she just held such this place of non-judgment. And there were so many things I could talk to her about and share about and be like, my first anger release was in front of her. But she did one first to show me. And it was just such a safe space of not judgment, and I really hold that space for my client. And I want to say something about the judgy thing, because we all judge. Like, I'm judgy. I just know it. And what I do, instead of trying to transmute it, is I notice it and then I just forgive myself. I just go, oh, there I am being judgy. Okay, I forgive myself for being judgy. And it because I think, again, like it's a natural human thing that we do. And does it ever go away? I don't know. I think it softens. As we come into more acceptance of ourselves, but it can be so subtle and we can realize we're not even doing it at times. So when I find myself doing it, I just go, oh, that's really cute. Like, I just find it amusing. Because the other thing that I really had to shift inside myself and what I work with my clients so much on is when we come at anything like it's a problem, like when we come at, like, I need to change my inner critic, or I need to change my judgment, or whatever, it's just perpetuating the fact that there's a problem, right? But when we can just accept, oh, there's this part of me that does this. Oh, there's this part of me that does this. Oh, there's this part of me that does this. Like, I worry. I am an amazing worrier. I can come up with worst case scenarios faster than anybody. Like, it's just, I just do. And I've tried to change it and transmute it and like plant medicine away, and I've tried everything. And I finally come to accept that, you know what? For now, I worry about shit. And like, I just have a different relationship to it and just let it be. And it's just freed up so much bandwidth for me that I'm just like, okay, there I go doing those things.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're like really being the witnesser.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're like in it, you're in the worry.
Yeah.
And you're witnessing it and like having compassion for the thing.
And there's some things that I look at like, okay, like I need to work on this. Like I realized with motherhood, I went into a hypervigilant pattern because I went from like being really secure in my career and having my days very predictable and being in control and knowing how things were gonna go to having my whole life flipped upside down and having this child who like did what she wanted to do. And like, I didn't have
excuse
control.
me, did you know that I'm the CEO here?
I'm like, no, we sleep now. This is when we sleep. And like, even like we had trouble with breastfeeding. And I'm like, wait a second, I read all the breastfeeding books. I have the milk supply, but wait, you're not doing it? What? Like, there were so many things. And I witnessed, I could see, all right, like I actually need help with this. Like, this isn't something that I can just go, oh, this is just me being me. I was like, oh no, something's triggered here, something's flared up, and this is something that needs attention. So it's just having that, knowing ourselves and having that discernment between being like, you know, this is kind of how I am, and like I'm gonna have compassion and humor with it and have a relationship to it where it's not a problem, it doesn't run my life, versus, ooh, yeah, this needs attention. Yeah. But not from a like, oh my gosh, I'm broken. And so with anyone and with all my clients, like you never want to come into personal growth work from the perspective of something's wrong and I need to fix it. Because that negates the whole purpose completely.
And what is the whole purpose?
The whole purpose is to realize we're whole and complete and nothing's wrong with us. We're just like a freaking human having an experience of being human.
Yeah. We get to play all 88 keys of that keyboard.
We do.
Yeah.
We do. And like life is, you know, life is life. And
it's going to keep lifing.
It's going to keep lifing. And, you know, again, as somebody who's done 20 years of work, I still have my stuff. I have more tools. I don't sit in it as long as I used to. It doesn't scare me as much as it used to. But we're not done. Like, still on the planet, still breathing, not done.
Yeah, I remember when I went to my first therapy session, like as an adult, I was 24. My father had just passed away, and I was like having some real like issues in my relationship. And I sat down in my pretty pink dress and my big hair, my big lashes, and I sat down. And the first thing he said, he's like, "Oh, you are a strong, angry woman." And I was like, "I'm not angry.
Oh, yeah.
I don't feel angry. I don't feel anger." And he was like, "Cute."
Yeah.
But then the next thing he said when I started talking about like sexual abuse and sexual trauma, he just looked at me and he's like, "You're not broken. Like, you're not broken. You're hiding." But you're not broken. And that one sentence, I mean, it was like my first session, therapy, 24 years old, and it really, I heard it. I was like, you're right, I'm not broken. I'm hiding. That felt true to me. And I just wonder how many people could benefit and how many people could actually hold the model or the paradigm for themselves that healing is possible if they were to shift this from like a diagnostic therapeutic, there is something wrong that needs to be fixed versus I am whole and complete.
Yeah.
I am having a human experience and I have everything inside to heal, like you said.
I love that therapist for you. That's beautiful.
Yeah, he was really special.
Yeah.
Thomas Jones, I just had him as a guest on the show.
Yeah.
He came on and like within the first 30 seconds I was weeping, crying,
Yeah.
like just sharing how much he had changed my life.
Yeah. And I don't really have a preference between therapy and coaching. It might sound like I do. I'm more about like finding the practitioner that works for you.
And also where you are at that time.
Where you are
in
at that
life.
time.
Yeah, I do
Absolutely.
both, depending.
Yeah. I have done both, yeah. When you said something about anger, I want to say, so women especially collapse into sadness too much because we don't do anger well. So it's so important for women, especially. That's such a part of the divine feminine, you know, that Kali energy, that real like rage. And what I see so often is women try to get at anger and then they just start crying. So one of my tips for women when you want to get at anger, have a good cry first. Like cry, be sad, collapse on the floor, cry, grieve, just cry. Then go for your anger. Because at the end of an anger, it's okay, like there's no rules, but generally when you do an anger release, if you collapse back into sadness, you haven't totally gone through and gotten to power, right? So at the end of a good anger burn, you want to feel like, whoa, like I feel really free right now.
Yeah.
You might be exhausted, but you feel really free. So just for women out there, like watch that collapse into sadness, because it's easier for us to go into sadness sometimes, and like find your rage too, because it's very powerful.
I love that. Okay, something I feel like you're uniquely qualified to talk about. I see this pattern, like some in our friend group, but just in this generation of women who maybe didn't have the healthiest male figure, like because
Right.
our fathers were not modeled how to express their feelings,
Right.
even how to like be a parent, because that like wasn't considered masculine in
Yeah.
that generation. So, and obviously this is a sweeping generalization, but I'm speaking sort of in generations
Yeah.
right now. But if we had a generation of dads who didn't really know how to sit with feelings, hold emotions, or even just be present, and then, you know, add on any level of abuse or addiction
Yeah.
on top of it. And then you have this generation of women who are hypervigilant, overachieving, you know, in their masculine or maybe in their trauma response, you know, jury's
Yeah,
out on
yeah.
which percentage of which. And now what I'm seeing is women who are, you know, making a lot of money and parenting and sort of running the household and sort of like being all things to all people, like inhabiting both the feminine and the masculine, and then not really leaving any room for their partners or attracting partners that aren't fully a match, or if they do, then castrating their partners. And so I would just love to hear your thoughts or theories on this as a, if you see it in sort of generational patterns or even in individuals.
Oh my gosh. I think we as women, especially this generation, are still finding our way to what being a woman and what the healthy feminine expression looks like. I think the feminine was so suppressed for so long and so outside of the work world and CEO positions and all of that, that there was just this like, we feel like we're making up for lost time. So I think women unconsciously or consciously collectively feel a sense of urgency of like, oh my gosh, like I've got to do everything. And sometimes it takes us out of our natural rhythm of being in the feminine and, you know, what we're just naturally inclined to do. The thing with women, and I'm not saying men aren't, but the thing with women is we're highly capable and we're highly adaptable, which means we can take on more than we're designed to do and still like not have it all fall apart. But it's leading to a lot of burnout. And like you said, it's leading to a lot of not feeling met because there's no space to be met in, because we're kind of like doing everything. And a lot of it comes from the programming from dad and the models from dad and like what the healthy masculine looks like. Because a lot of us grew up with, you know, the emotionally available dad, unavailable dad, or the dad who worked and the mom who stayed home or whatever. And so I don't think we've had a good, like you said, a good model of what that looks like. And so how do we attract that masculine when we're trying to be that ourselves? So I think a lot of women are compensating for what they didn't get from dad within themselves, or what they see that their mom didn't get from dad within themselves, versus like really believing a man could fill that space. So that's one of the things that I think is into it. I think it's like a multi-layered, deeper conversation than that, but I think just a lot of, and I think I've seen a lot of women just don't feel, and this is a subconscious thing, don't feel or trust that a man could step into that space.
Yeah, and that feels like, it's, again, such an advocate for more people coaching, because once you can see that belief of, I actually don't believe that I will be met. I don't believe that I will find someone who is a match for this.
Yeah.
And so I'm just going to do it myself. like if you don't really address that underlying belief, like no amount of couples counseling is going to do the trick.
Well, yeah, and if you had a dad that wasn't there for you, you're going to have a deep belief that I have to do it on my own. And so even if there are people around you that could support you, you're bumping up against a belief that, no, I just do it on my own because it's safer that way.
Whew, as we change that projector, the projection changes. Wow. Well, I want to say thank you for your 20 years of coaching.
I feel
How
so
many
old.
people have you worked with?
Oh, I don't even know.
Like
Thousands.
thousands, tens, I mean, through your podcast and books, certainly tens of thousands.
Retreats and events, and like a lot.
Wow.
I feel very blessed.
What are you most proud of in your career?
In my career?
It could be a single person or like a dent you've made in the industry.
I think I'm just most proud of the fact that I didn't get caught up in competing.
Like with other coaches?
Yeah. Like with other big names or other people. I really just focused on what I wanted to do. And yeah, that feels really good.
I mean, talk about divine feminine, right? And this comes back to like, oh, how does the goddess want to express through me?
Yeah.
And trusting that.
Yeah, and I've always, used my own life as my research laboratory, and have done my best to be in integrity and walk the talk, and also just prioritized my own. I haven't burnt out, which says a lot, because the things I hear and things people share with me, I'm hugely empathic, and I've had to learn how to be empathic but have boundaries and not go into sympathy, because sympathy is a judgment and that drains your energy, and also not go into over responsibility for people. But that's one of the ways the divine feminine expresses through me, is being able to hold this space of compassion. And I have endless compassion for people and bring it all. Like nothing's too much, but I don't take it on myself. And so I have zero burnout for like people stuff.
That's huge. Wait, this, Christine, feels really important. Like that as a skill to teach publicly. Like I don't know if this feels charming or not to you, but like a webinar, like a big event of teaching that particular skill, which you are masterful at, it feels like people really need that right now.
Yeah.
People really need to know how to have endless compassion, how to take compassionate action without getting into empathetic burnout or sympathetic fatigue.
Yes.
Because that's what's happening.
Yes.
Right? And then it's just creating more suffering.
Yes, and great coaches and great healers and great therapists end up quitting because they're burnt out.
I'll share a little micro win last night. After I had a 13-hour day, I woke up at 4 a.m. I did 3 podcasts at a live event last night. Got home, I was like crawling into bed. It's 11:30, and suddenly my son is like, "Mommy!" And I thought he was just having a nightmare, and I was actually like excited to go in and get to cuddle with him and soothe him. But he had a really bad earache, and he was like in extreme pain. And thank God he's so healthy, and I rarely see him sick and in pain.
Yeah.
But what I was proud of is that I was just sitting there and I was just loving him. Like I wasn't trying to do anything. I didn't have any medicine. There was like actually nothing I could do.
Yeah.
And so I just sat there and I loved him so hard. And I didn't take on his pain. I didn't feel any suffering myself. And I was just grateful for the opportunity to love him in his pain. And it felt like a real win for me. Because especially with my child,
Of
we'll go into that feeling.
I get it.
Yeah, and it was just, it felt
That's a huge win, Mama.
Yeah,
Wow.
it felt really great.
Wow.
And it felt like I know everyone's different in different spots, but I wanted to extract that and give some of that medicine to the planet right now. Because you open up social media and see the suffering, and it's like, we think that somehow our grief will alleviate someone else's grief, and it doesn't.
It doesn't.
It just adds to the collective. And so truly, thank you for being a model of this. Thank you for holding so much compassion for your folks that they can step into the most beautiful version of themselves.
Yeah.
Thank you for your podcast, for your books. So again, I was named the podcast is Over It and On With It with Christine Hassler. Can you share your books?
Yeah, so 20-something, 20 Everything, and the 20-something Manifesto, they're from way back. Those are my first 2. And then Expectation Hangover came out about 10 years ago. And then the audio version is going to be on Audible of me recording that.
And so where's the best place for people to find you?
Christine Hassler.
ChristineHassler.com.
That's it.
And you're not really that active on social media?
I'm on Instagram. I mean, less since I've become a mom, but I'm there. I do some stories. just live
I will say that it's quality, not quantity with
Very
you.
much.
I remember when you were first meeting Stephanos, I knew you a little bit, but watching those stories and just the magic and depth of manifestation, I was like, yes, Christine,
That was a
get
juicy
it.
time.
Yeah. Well, thank you truly for deepening with me and for coaching me in real time.
Thank you for allowing me.
Yeah.
Thank you for giving me that opportunity.
So sweet friends, I want to really celebrate and encourage you checking out Christine's work. She is truly masterful, one of the original coaches in this space. And even listening to her podcast, you were going to get so much out of it. And if you enjoyed this episode, if there was something that rang true, or if you had an aha moment, my request would be that you share it with someone, maybe someone who's having empathetic fatigue, or someone who is judging themselves as broken that you think would derive some medicine from this conversation. If you want to leave us a review, I always check them. I want to know what's resonating with you, what you want more of. And if you want to screenshot it and post it on Instagram, you can tag me at Ziva Meditation, and you are
At Christine Hassler.
At Christine Hassler.
Yeah.
And let us know what you thought. We love you. Thank you for being you. Thank you for hopefully being inspired to get a coach, right? Because as we heal our stuff, we have more capacity to help others. So I love you, and I will see you next week on Why Isn't Everyone Doing This?